And this Hangout on Air is live on December 23rd, 2014. The Best of Us, Reflections from the WH Travel Bloggers and Study Abroad, because we're talking all about educational travel and study abroad with two of the pioneers and the experts in the field, as much as they like or dislike being said about them. We'll go first with the person who doesn't have her lower third. Jessica, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dr. Jessie Voigts. I live in Michigan, and I was very pleased to be invited to the White House Travel Bloggers Summit. That was a highlight of my career in international education and study abroad. I have my PhD in international education, and I've worked in study abroad for over 20 years. So this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart.
Beautiful. And Greg?
Okay, well, I don't have a PhD, though my parents do, and they didn't bequeath them to me. But I was equally pleased to be invited, actually somewhat surprised, since I'm not a blogger, but I do have a long background, actually starting with my father with Transitions back, which he founded back in 1977, predicated around educational travel and all the issues that were discussed at the conference. So I grew up essentially traveling, studying, and living abroad at various stages of my life. So the subject is sort of in my blood, and it was very interesting to hear such incredibly sharp people from the administration describe their vision at the summit.
Okay, beautiful. A question for both of you, and I would like to remind viewers, if you have a question, you're welcome to post that into our Q&A app. We'll get to it. But a question for both of you, backing up a step, what was this summit, and when was it held, and how did you finagle the invitation?
It was held on December 9th, just a few weeks ago, and we had nice little programs that were on our chairs at the summit, but several of us got an email from the White House, and we weren't sure if it was real. They said, send your information and your social security number, and you'll be invited. And it was interesting to see the range of people that they had invited to the summit. It was mostly travel bloggers and a lot of people that weren't naturally associated with study abroad. So I think it was a good idea that they invited so many people that have the eyes and the ears of people that travel.
Beautiful. Greg, you got this White House email?
I got the White House email, and I was a little reluctant at first because I wasn't sure if it was real or not. And I remember asking Jesse whether I should put my social security number in there, you know. But yeah, it was the same thing. It came kind of out of the blue, but I'm pleased it was real, of course.
Beautiful, and you know, it's great to see that the video from is that the entire event. We do see some videos from the White House on YouTube. Was that the entire event?
That was the entire sort of the essence of the conversation and the substance. We also had you know, breakfast. We had some sponsored lunch and a sponsored dinner. And the previous night, unrelated to the event, sort of a get together. But the essence of the event. Oh, and we of course we had the White House visit, which was quite nice that morning before the actual you know, conference.
Mm-hmm. Are we seeing any sort of related information coming out from the U.S. government about study abroad programs, or you know, I'm looking for stats or percentages. I saw some anecdotal evidence that one of which was there are more Chinese students studying in the U.S. than U.S. students studying all around the world. But is any of this, you know, citations, is any of this cited? Do we have the stats?
Yeah, every year IIE, which is the Institute for International Education, publishes a report called Open Doors. It's a remarkable achievement every year, and the numbers are extraordinary, and they're so fun to dig into and see the trends, the global trends, but it's very interesting. So I check out IIE.org.
Mm-hmm. So was anything prepared by the government?
Not to my knowledge, but they are starting a new study abroad office, and they will be having a virtual study abroad fair in February, so hopefully they can take the handles of some of that.
Can you tell us a little bit about this virtual study abroad fair?
Oh, it's very exciting. Let me pull up the website. Maybe Greg can talk for a minute.
um, well, I'll let you pull up the website since that's the question.
Greg, paint a picture though. How many people were at this event, and where was the event? I'm sure the event wasn't at the White House. Where was the event, and how many people were there?
The actual conference was in the Eisenhower, I believe, the Eisenhower building, in one of the rooms. There were probably, in addition to the 100 bloggers, there were other people, members of the press, who I think were allowed in, and then other members of the administration who didn't speak. So there must have been about 100, between 100 and 100, I mean, excuse me, 120 and 150 people all told in the room at that time, I believe.
Jesse, you have a screen on pulled up. Let's take a look at that.
I do. It's at IIE.org, and it's called the Virtual Fair. And when they talk about the Virtual Study Abroad Fair, it's going to be on February 25th, and it'll go for 8 hours from noon until 8 p.m. And it's put on by College Week Live, IIE, then the U.S. Department of State, and it supports the Generation Study Abroad Initiative. And I think that the Generation Study Abroad Initiative is the main focus of the administration's efforts to increase our numbers of study abroad for a variety of reasons.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, we'll make sure that we include that link in our show notes. Was this kind of like was this a kind of a well-timed boost for study abroad and educational travel? Are we at the position where this is really a message that we really need to be focusing on for 2015?
Absolutely. I think what prompted it is the fact that I think it was during the 15 years prior to 2012, 2013, there was a doubling of study abroad students from 150,000 to 290,000, and they were projecting, given the current rate of growth of 2% per year, and the fact that many of the study abroad programs that people were going on were of shorter duration, that it would take until 2050 or another 35 years to double again. And I think that what the White House realizes is that there are many parallel interests in terms of Americans studying abroad that have to be addressed right now. And I think that's one of the reasons they went to bloggers to go to the grassroots to get the message out. And the various interests relate to our national security interest, insofar as, there are more students here from international schools than we have students abroad, and we are not learning insufficient numbers, insufficient quantity enough about STEM, for example, studies in advanced countries.
What's STEM?
STEM is oh my goodness, science, technology, engineering, and math, I believe.
Yeah.
And yes, and the problem is that if if America continues to, in sort of how should I say, becomes isolated from the state of the art in other countries such as China, then we will inevitably fall behind, and that goes against our national security. That's one very prominent and obvious element. Then, of course, there's the cultural element in terms of in terms of the standard liberal arts view that it's important to integrate and to immerse yourself in other cultures in order to understand them and develop mutual relations. Then there's the political interest in terms of developing diplomacy, peace, and national security through relations. And then I believe, and this is something that's more my editorial, is that I think it's sort of to counter our historical, geographic, and cultural tendency towards isolationism. Most modern countries around the world study and travel abroad far more than we do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my overview.
Hey, Jess, we're not seeing your video for some reason. Are you?
Let me. I have it. Let's see. Seems to be a problem. I can't get the lower third, and since I screen shared, it's not showing me. I'll tinker with it.
Yeah, see if you can take off the screen share, or well, good luck to you. We have a question coming in from Alistair McKenzie, and here is Alistair's question. If the U.S. government could choose where its young citizens might study abroad, which countries would it pick, Europe or the BRICS?
If I could answer that first, and Jessie could maybe add her own view. That was actually one of the big topics that was reiterated by various speakers, which is that there's a huge necessity for students who do study abroad to not just pick Europe as a primary destination, as we have historically, and that the developing economies of Brazil, Russia, and well, my goodness, what's the other? China, India, and China, of course. Yeah, India and China are of great consequence to our shared knowledge and development. Obviously, China, in terms of their advanced knowledge of, for example, green energy and other technological developments. Brazil as well, in terms of green energy and in terms of its growing economy. Russia has a growing economy. Of course, there's other political issues. And India, of course, has the huge software element, which stands out first and foremost, but there are many other trade relations. So I think, to answer that, basically, I think that there is a strong push to have stronger relations with the BRICS countries over and above, not over and above, but in addition to Europe, to extend our reach and knowledge and our relations.
Anything to add there, Jessie?
I really picked up at the summit. I really picked up the fact that because we're entering this new partnership with China, that students studying abroad in China and learning Chinese is really, really important, and they're looking to increase those numbers as well. And I remember maybe 10 or 15 years ago, Chinese and learning Mandarin and studying abroad in China was the next big thing, and I think it still is. I don't think we're sending enough of our students there to learn about this economic powerhouse.
Beautiful. Hey, Alistair, beautiful. That's a good answer there. Alistair asked a follow-up question, and he asked, which countries might surprise the students and educators in terms of return on investment?
It might surprise them, meaning the administration?
Or the students and the educators. What's a good value for students?
That's kind of a broad question. I'm not sure. Value in terms of the cost. I mean, there are other countries in which they can study which are a little less expensive than other countries. For example, we have an article on our site that describes the relative cost of studying for a master's degree in Southeast Asia being significantly lower, and the access to information being equally available. In terms of return on investment, I think that, again, it's going back once again to China, where there are currently, I think, well over 200,000 Chinese students in the United States at our universities, and I think we send 15,000 or so abroad to China currently. So we're not gaining the same amount of knowledge reciprocally.
I hear you. Anything to add there, Jessie?
I think in terms of an ROI, I think that a student needs to think about where the global economic trends are going to be in the next few years and how they can participate in that. And it certainly appears that China and Asia are still powerhouses, and I think that studying abroad in those areas in terms of a career would probably bring an enormous ROI.
Beautiful. Hope that answers your question, Alistair, and thank you both for the answer. Jesse, we're not getting your video, so I'm going to ask you, if you can, to take us to your website in the next few minutes and show us some of the resources that students and educators might want to take a look at.
Sure. Here, can you see the website now?
Yes.
Oh, well, something's working, right? Here's my article on the summit, and one of the things I love is research. I'm an educator to the core, and so I did a lot of research on this, and it was a lot of fun. But there's a lot of things that people can learn on our website, and we range the gamut from family travel tips to regular travel tips to food travel tips to artists. We have 35 editors from all around the world, and they share very interesting articles and viewpoints. And we do a lot of book reviews. I just reviewed an illustrated history of Kazakhstan. And when I was in graduate school, I had many Kazakh friends. And so it was interesting to read this book. But yeah, we have a lot of resources. It's a great deal of fun.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want to go back a little bit in time. Has study abroad changed noticeably from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s to the noughts to whatever we're calling this decade?
Go ahead, Greg.
No, thank you.
You want me to do it?
The history of study abroad, I don't have it at my fingertips.
I can talk about it because this is my passion. And then I think I'll hop out and hop back on so that people can see. But study abroad initially started with people's grand tours, of course, and it mostly focused on Europe because it was easy to get to, and the languages were similar, or Romance languages. And then after the war, World War II, more students started coming back with global experience, and they were more interested in learning and sharing about the world. And I think it just snowballed from there. And then, of course, people were doing heritage study abroad, so they wanted to go back to countries where their ancestors were from. And then the increased diversity in study abroad has really changed the face of study abroad. People are asking for a lot more fields of study, for instance, music or art, than the traditional fields, and they're looking at a lot more diverse locations.
Beautiful. You know, one of the questions that I have is related to the technology. You know, I remember back in the fine old 80s when I went to college at Indiana University, we'd have those, you know, study abroad students who went off to Italy and off to China, and, you know, you might get a postcard from them, but that was about it. Today, you know, students have, you know, all of these web tools at their disposal.
Mm-hmm.
How has that changed study abroad? You know, from my personal view, you know, I really would like to see more students blogging about their experiences, or teachers blogging about their experiences. It's the one thing that I thought held Oaxaca back, that it was, you know, such a center for education, but the teachers themselves, the educators, were reluctant to write about this in real time. So you had that deleterious effect of tourism going down, down, down from 2007, 8, 9, 10, whereas there were a number of educators and students there, but they wouldn't talk about it. The teachers wouldn't talk about it. How has technology changed in the past couple decades?
Well, I think it's changed a great deal. I think a lot of students blog now. I think that a lot of students are still extremely connected to their home and their friends at home, and I think that has a plus and a minus. I think when you're blogging about it, it can provide sort of a reflective experience while you're doing it, but I think also staying in touch so much takes away from you immersing yourself in the local environment in your classes. So it's a double-edged sword.
Agreed. Greg, any thoughts on that?
Well, I agree. Yeah, we actually have an article on that, real versus virtual study abroad, and basically figuring out the balancing act so that you can participate in real time and totally immerse yourself in the experience. as opposed to being pulled back by the umbilical cord, or the virtual umbilical cord, which Facebook and Twitter and the blog can turn out to be. If you're staying in a homestay at in another land, you're far more likely to learn the language and get to know the people if you're not constantly in contact back home, in my experience. At least in my experience, and both in my sort of intuitive sense. Part of what I notice when I see blogs as opposed to the articles we solicit is that the blogs tend to talk about writers of blogs tend to talk more about themselves than the culture that they're and the people around whom they're with whom they're living. And we always try to get people to look outside, to talk about what they see outside, and just their experience of the external world will be internalized implicitly. But what we worry about is when everything is first coming out of the eye rather than from the outside. So it's a Pandora's box. There's the plus, there's the minus.
I think go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think there's two kinds of experiences that study abroad students can choose for themselves. They can have like an Instagram experience where they show everybody everything right away and it's purely visual, and that may be how they experience the culture. Or they can be more thoughtful and share photos, share some posts, but maybe really dig deep while you're there and learn more while you're there, and maybe share when you get back.
It's interesting. We didn't 10 years ago. Did we have YouTube?
No.
Greg and I have had websites forever. Planeta started as a Gopher site in '94, and then went to a website in '95. And it was a big deal to be able to add a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the advent of, I think it was like Flickr back in 2003, it was a lot easier just to add photos. And I remember, at that time, visiting the Pachote market in Oaxaca, and if I had a Planeta article about it, I could have one photo. And then all of a sudden with Flickr, it was a godsend, because you could put up not just one photo, but you could put up 20 or 200. And particularly for locals in Oaxaca, no one wanted someone else's photo at the very top. So you could create some sort of a random shuffler effect in the photos as well. And again, this was a very radical change in how we could present the information. When we were able to post the photos online through a social web channel like Flickr, or today's Instagram or Facebook or Google+, we're able to solicit comments from the locals themselves. And I guess the big bugbear I have with students and the social web these days, and I would say students and educators, is the idea of using these channels before, during, and after their trips. So many people that I saw visiting Oaxaca would be basically kind of ignorant about the basic things because they hadn't paid any attention to it beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, if you had done your research beforehand, if you'd read the newspaper, you'd be kind of clued in on some of the local politics or some of the local events. Likewise, we have these Facebook groups or pages that cover, just a myriad of topics. And if we want to pay attention to them, and again, my suggestion or recommendation would be to do that before, during, and after a trip. I'll say this and I'll shut up, but I don't know about you folks, but the art of travel, visiting a place, to me makes the place much more real. So that when I hear about an earthquake, or when I hear about some sort of Oscar-winning a film or whatever news item, all of a sudden it's like, ding, I see this. When I think of Kazakhstan, I haven't been there, but I think, oh, my buddy John Noble wrote the Lonely Planet guidebook to it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my virtual connection.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you ask me about Quito, Ecuador, or Sydney, Australia, or Cape Town, South Africa, it's like, oh, I know this plaza. And then it becomes a much more real place.
Mm-hmm. I think that's so true, and I think that however we can get friends in other places, it makes us want to travel more. And I think that's the beauty of the internet, that we can connect with people before we go through a variety of websites, Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and couch surfing. And I think that the means of making friends overseas is much easier now. And I think that it can, of course there are problems, but I think it can only help build global citizenship. When you know somebody that's there, you care about it.
Agreed. Greg?
I would just sort of parallel it to walking around an unknown land with a camera. Do you look at it through the prism of the camera, or do you look at it first with your eyes directly? And to me, I'd rather look at it with my eyes and experience it directly, and perhaps then pause and perhaps take a picture afterwards. But I'm always for the first immediate experience. And like a writer of or a novelist, I tend to think that people write best what they think about in retrospect rather than what they experience in the immediate, which I know goes against the flow, but I'm known to go against the flow.
Well, and I think thoughtful reflection on what you've experienced can only enhance what you communicate.
I think we can have both. And again, I think with when we look at photography, honestly, I love being able to take a picture of a tree I don't recognize, post it up there, and just say, "What's the name of this tree?" And you create conversations with other visitors, with other locals, with people who have more information than yourself, if you give yourself that opportunity. If you take your photos and you upload it after the trip, many times you're not going to get these tips. You're not going to get that insight. And again, I understand it can go both ways. I think you can go to extremes. One of my favorite nominees for Word of the Year just came out on WordSpy this month is Silent Traveler. And it's the kind of traveler who refuses to talk to locals or refuses to go to the visitor information center, and plans his or her trip based on what's on that smartphone. And you may not like that, but there are plenty of people who have traded in their 3-year-old guidebook for a smartphone application for their Yelp reviews, and they're going to make their plans accordingly. And in the work that I did in Oaxaca with the markets and continue to do as an ally, is just to make sure that the markets are present. Is the current location there? Are the hours there? Again, in the bleak past of 2001 or 1998, the best you could have was a guidebook. And if you went to a market that was only open on Fridays and Saturdays and went there on a Wednesday or Thursday, there was no sign outside that said "Come back tomorrow."
Right.
Whereas now with Google Plus or Yelp or all of these other technical doodads, we have the opportunity to get that information. The question again is the literacy of the locals. Do you know how to present this online so that you can get those visitors?
That's true. And one of our editors, Kristen Guff from MyKidsEatSquid.com, just has a feature article on our website this week called 3 Better Apps for Eating Abroad. And there are so many apps for your smartphone that can really help. And one of the ones that she mentioned that I love is called Word Lens. And you hold your smartphone up to the sign, and then it translates it into your language. And so I think that language is becoming less of a barrier, but I do agree that many times, especially small communities, don't know how to present their information to the world so that people can learn more about them.
Going back to Greg's point about some of the articles, when you do the me version, and I just saw what I would consider a terrible feature on Lonely Planet about Oaxaca markets. It's I got up early, I did this, I went on this tour, I went to this market, and I just noticed how many times the names of locals were included in this article. And the only person that was named was the person's guide. You didn't name a single person. The author didn't name a single person from the market. And Yeah, I don't know about, again, I don't know about you folks, but the best kind of travel that I've experienced is when you can go to a foreign place and eat a local meal, and you get to know the name of the cook. You get to know the name of the person who um, sells you the mamela or the empanada. That makes the world to me. Uh, are we naming
I
the locals? And I
I
think
think
I think there. I'll say this, not shut up, but I think there's a great place if we got students involved in this. It's not just where did you go, what did you learn, but can you help talk up the local economy and the places you're going. Sorry, Greg.
no, I was just going to say I think that one of the themes that was recurring throughout the conference was the notion that by traveling and studying abroad, you develop your sense of perspective. So one of the great things about travel is that everybody has their own way of traveling, their own perspectives. I know some writers, and I've seen some writers who shoot some fantastic candid photos even while they're traveling. I don't know how they do it. I don't have that particular ability to take a portrait of a child, right in front of me. But bravo to them. So, if it works for them, that's fine for the, that I'm open to any possibility. I don't think there's one way to travel or study, and I think that to sort of have some sort of moralistic view as to how people should travel probably doesn't make sense, and it sort of goes against the idea of being open. Um, all I was trying to suggest is that in some cases there's a tendency to fall in love with the instruments of modern technology to such a degree that it overwhelms the capability of the person to realize what's actually there in the immediate. I see that as a tendency. That's all. Just something to be aware of. Just like someone who watches TV and suddenly 6 hours goes by. It's something that it can be addictive, as everybody knows who's been on Twitter, Facebook, etc. But I think that every possible way of traveling is valid, as long as it's done right. It's just like any kind of music. If it's done well, it can be done beautifully.
But shouldn't that be the topic of conversation? And again, it would be nice to see. It would be nice to follow up this particular hangout with another one in a few months and talk to the people who are traveling or sending students abroad. Because I don't think that travelers or students really get the idea that there are different ways, and that those of us who have some ideas of how to connect with locals, to be able to articulate those options. Again, one of the reasons, and I wrote about the Oaxaca markets for transitions abroad, and I'm a big fan of it because the people are very hospitable. There is so much to learn. If you just, the act of buying chilies, the act of buying coffee, the act of buying crystallized candy at the market can turn into an incredible learning experience if you treat the market as more than a shopping trip.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to that Pachote market and get in and out in 15 minutes if you want to. If you do that, you're really missing out on the experience, and the experience is not one that's necessarily pre-written or predetermined. I'm going to go here and I'm going to learn my Zapotec language skills. It's making yourself open. And again, I think it's the role of the writers, the bloggers, ourselves. And I've done this with Greg, so I better say I'm doing it. It's being able to say this as a suggestion. Mm-hmm. Because if you come from a culture that doesn't have these markets or doesn't have X sport or X museum, and you go to this place, you're going to be in a position where you're really not sure what to make of it. So we are looking for tips, and we are looking for ways of engagement. How we do that, is there one way or is there one way that's the right way? I would, agree with Greg that there are many ways of doing these things, but we need to be talking about it. Photography. When is it okay to take a picture of a kid? I mean, if I see visitors bribing kids with pencils or candies for a candid photo, I put in my book, I'm not talking to that person. They've kind of demeaned this relationship. you get into a relationship with a parent, and then you and the family, and then you have a nice photo of a kid, fine. But we've all seen people who kind of go after those ethnic shots, or those what I call travel porn photography. And I don't care if you're using a smartphone or an old camera. If you're not making connection with the locals, you're missing out.
I think a lot of study abroad programs, we've worked in study abroad on teaching intercultural sensitivity, but I think a lot of study abroad programs are working really, really hard to teach students before they go, not only about culture shock and intercultural sensitivity, but about local customs and mannerisms. And so I think that when you, whether you go through a study abroad program or you create your own study abroad experience, I think that part of the problem is age. Remember when you were 19, 20, 21? I was really clueless then. I lived and worked in Japan for a year, and now I think back, there's so much more I could have learned. I was just so young and I didn't know what to learn. And so I think that it's part of us as a parent and us as a culture to teach people that go overseas to look around and pay attention and be interculturally sensitive and not ethno and egocentric, but to really open yourself to new experiences.
Beautiful. I have a question for both of you then. Do we have any idea of the statistics, not of the formal educational programs, but the informal ones? Do we know how many adults are going overseas to pick up a language or to pick up culinary skills?
I haven't seen any statistics of that nature, only for study abroad.
Yeah, I think because there's no one organization organizing it. I know friends that do it. I know people that go maybe to Colombia and study language for a month, or take a cooking class in Thailand on their vacation. But I think that those kinds of experiences should be tracked, because study abroad doesn't end when you graduate from college. It's life learning. It's learning whenever you travel. So I think it's really important that we maybe think about those kinds of things and think about global education as a lifespan experience. I know Greg and I have talked about that a lot.
Yes. Yeah. Well, in your very in your very name, Wandering Educators, you give yourself away. I actually, during the conference, one of the things that kept occurring to me is that I was tired of hearing the word study abroad, because really, to me, educational travel sort of subsumes that, because learning never ends, from childhood till the last days. And I think that there's, in my experience, since I did have the opportunity, because being the son of some crazy parents who traveled while they were students and while they were getting their doctorates, and while they were as every summer and on sabbaticals, and they took us along. The younger you are when you travel, the more you are susceptible to picking things up, both in terms of language, in terms of your imagination, in terms of your curiosity. And I think, Jesse, you've done a lot of work with young bloggers to help guide them a little bit in terms of writing and seeing the world, so that it's not predicated around just themselves, but where they actually see the world first. And I think that's a very important thing you're doing.
Thank you. I teach a teen travel blogging class, and it's remarkable to see their journeys. And they're all world travelers, but it's remarkable to see their personal journeys as they learn how to present, how to go from the I, writing a journal and I do this and I do that, to being really good travel writers that can share the essence of place. And I think those are the kinds of readers we want to read. And I think that's the kind of global citizenship that we can promote,
Beautiful. Beautiful. Final question regarding this big summit. The follow-up event is February 25th, and that's a virtual trade fair.
There is a virtual study abroad fair. I don't know that that's a follow-up event. I know that it's huge for college students and their parents, but I'm hoping that we can see more from the White House, from the administration, on how to promote global citizenship and study abroad. We're using the hashtag study abroad because, and we're using the hashtag WH travel bloggers, and it's interesting to follow those conversations on Twitter, and I would hate to see for that die down, because I think this should be a conversation for the rest of our lives.
I agree, Jesse. I think that one of the things that struck me, having viewed the conference actually just today, again on YouTube, is to what degree every single administration official kept asking, please give us your input, please give us your insights. We want your help. We know you have the ideas. We know that you're familiar with different perspectives, different forms of technology, etc. Which is, I think, the real reason they brought in travel bloggers as opposed to so many experts in the education field. They were kind of looking for a kind of grassroots, fresh eyes towards that particular subject matter. So I think that this will be ongoing. I think it looks to me as though it's a very open-minded administration, and they're looking for ideas. So I don't see this as fading away in the least, and I think both Jesse and I are committed to taking this forward as far as we can, in terms of helping out with whatever ideas we do have,
That's true. This is our passion, Greg and I. We can talk about this for hours, weeks, days, months.
Hey, don't tell Rod that. He'll take us up on it.
I will take you up on it. Hey, I am showing you, this is I think you've seen this. This is the Storify feature that I prepared that kind of collects some of those posts about the WH travel bloggers and study abroad and it's been a nice way of curating some of this information. Greg, I'm looking for one of your photos at the White House, but I don't see it.
Because I can't take a photo, but look for Jesse has great photos. So.
There we go. There we go. Do either of you have either of you seen Storify before?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very pleased with it. It's a nice way of collecting some of this information that otherwise kind of just drops out of the the internet jungle. What do you want to call it? This is why we're writers, not speakers. So much of this information is so ephemeral, and if there's not a good way of tagging it or collecting it, it just kind of disappears. So, if you have any other suggestions, I'll be happy to add it to the Storify. But I'm very, Greg and I have been looking at Flipboard as well as a curation tool, but we didn't have that 5 years ago.
Yeah, well, there are many of them now. I think, Jesse, you're working on with one tool yourself, right? Or several.
I use Learnist.
Right. And even Pinterest can be useful if customized correctly, because you can create a library or a board of related documents, which you can then share. So there are so many different ways. But I understand Storify creates a kind of a sequential dialogue. It's a good tool. Wish there were 48 hours in a day.
Or more, right?
Yeah, at least.
Enough time. We want to share all the study abroad goodness.
That's right.
Okay, I'm going to let you
Okay.
finish up with any final comments or observations, and make a pitch to both of you that if you would like to talk about this again with me, I'd be happy to host another hangout about educational travel / study abroad, and see if we can bring in some other voices in this. I think what happened at that December 9th summit was incredible, and I kind of was clued into it thanks to Greg's Twitter feed and Google Plus feed, and said, Greg, we have to talk about this, and we can talk about it privately, or we can talk about it publicly and see if we can again keep the momentum going. Because frankly, I feel like too many people in the United States do not see their options, do not see their options of travel abroad, and it was, frankly, it was only because I so thoroughly disliked my college-level German course that made me want to learn Spanish abroad, and sent me off to a language school. And it was more than learning a language. but how do you explain that to folks? You know, you can do this, and it is so enriching to your life, and it can be enriching to other people's lives if you put yourself in that position. And I'd love to talk about that with you folks, and you know, we'll figure out how to schedule a follow-up. Not before this year is over, but hopefully in early 2015.
Okay. All
I
right.
think
Sounds
it's
good.
the hashtag study abroad, because if you search for that on Twitter, all listeners, you will be so pleased to see how international education has changed people's lives. I go to Twitter and I read that hashtag every day, and I get super happy because it has changed so many people's lives, and it reminds us that our work is important and critical. And I really applaud the administration for bringing attention to it, not only for our national security and our national economy, but for our people. I think it's very, very important.
Greg, any final comments there?
Well, what I was pleasantly surprised about was the sort of way in which the openness of the administration to bring in, obviously to bring in bloggers, but to talk about collaboration with people in higher education and in the private worlds, so that ideas can flow from various sectors. I think it's really important that ideas not be in the realm of either the government or the private or individuals, but that there be a dialogue. And one of the things that's always concerned me is that that intellectuals and students, or professors and students, don't necessarily have a straightforward dialogue. And in this case, there was no condescension on the part of the administration, no matter how intelligent these people were. And there was a dialogue that was formed and will continue to go on as a result of this event. And I think that's we have to give kudos to the Obama administration for being so open without being political.
Well done. I want to thank you both for your time and passion in this field. And by golly, let's continue this conversation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate it.